Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Thrive Stories. I am your host, Margi DeLynn, and I am joined today by my co-hosts, John DeLynn, my life partner in love. Hi, John.
It is, Margi. It is so fun to have you in the driver's seat. It's
Thank
fun.
you, babe.
Yeah. How does it feel?
New. It feels new.
Does it
but
feel
I'm
like
glad you're here.
Does it feel like the hot seat, or does it feel like you have power and like the throne?
The throne? Interesting choice of words. Also, we want to welcome the wise and witty Carah over there. Hello, Carah,
hey.
bro.
Thanks, Mark. Margi is she's one of my favorites. I've become a good friend now of the DeLynn family. I think that you all are bright, shining stars, and Margi is actually the brightest one in the DeLynn galaxy. So I love anytime you come to the studio.
Thank you.
John's like, surprised, are we?
No, it's true.
It's true.
It's true.
Very kind. Thank you for that.
Anyway, I'm excited for this episode.
So before we dive in, let me just say a little bit about Thrive Stories because it's new. So the idea of Thrive Stories is it's a bit different than a long form interview. It's more of a 1 to 2 hour interview. And the idea is to focus on a particular area of thriving after transitioning. So some sample areas could be finding spirituality. It could be finding community. It could be improving mental health. It could be parenting. It could be healthy marriage. It could be navigating grief and loss. We have actually a full list of all the areas on the nomination form that's found in the link below this podcast today. We'll provide that link. You can nominate someone you know. We do ask that you try to get consent before you do that. And you can also nominate yourself. So that's the idea behind Thrive Stories. Did I leave anything out?
No, just that maybe the way they differ from our long form faith transition stories is we spend less time on the life as a Mormon, less time on the deconstruction, and just more time on a particular element or two of the transition, and then following that from pre-faith crisis all the way through to post. And the heavy focus is on the healing and growth after the faith crisis. And we try to keep it to under 2 hours if we can. We'll see if we can do that today.
Perfect.
See if Dave helps us out with that.
No pressure.
I'll try to keep it short.
So we would love to. I'm so excited for our guest today. We have Dave Biesinger here. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Margi.
Thank you for being here.
So good to be here. Thank you for letting me come to this space. It really is such an honor.
Oh, we are thrilled. We're going to have John just say a piece or two, a little intro to Dave and how we kind of know Dave and a bit about Dave. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've known Dave for a few years now. I talk a lot about our pods, how after a faith crisis, we need to find friends and community to help us rebuild our life, because one of the most certain things that happens in most people who experience a faith crisis, a Mormon faith crisis, is they lose a majority of their friends, sometimes a lot of family, and they definitely lose their entire community almost all the time. And so Margi and I, so what we try to encourage people to do is build up their own set of, 3 or 4 to 10, either couples or friends that you can kind of do life with, that you can kind of have a community with. And so we have a couple pods, and Dave Biesinger is in one of our 2 pods. So we hang out with Dave regularly. We do fun things, but Dave's been a dear friend for many years. Dave used to work for the LDS Church. I don't know if he's going to be talking about that today, but he had a really cool and interesting role at the church before he ended up leaving the church's employ. But that's not in any way the coolest part about Dave. Dave works with my dear friend Christian Moore in the Why Try organization. He is a videographer, but he's literally one of the smartest, wisest, and most good-hearted humans I know. And so when Margi and I were thinking about how to launch the Thrive Stories project, the name Dave Biesinger just jumped right out to the top of the list for us. And so, yeah, Dave's a dear friend. And Dave, we want to also give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself just a tiny bit before we dive into your story. So what would you want to add and say just as an introduction to you before we dive in?
Yeah, I grew up in Santa Barbara, California. I'm a Utah transplant. I think you're gonna learn a whole lot more about me in the interview. And so I wouldn't say much more than that. Like anything that we would say, it'll probably come out.
Okay.
Brilliant. Beautiful. Well, let's begin, shall we?
Let's begin.
Okay. So what area did you choose for today?
So I chose finding meaning and purpose.
Okay. And with finding meaning and purpose, if you were to kind of look back pre-transition, what did that look like before?
So when I grew up, I've done the math before, and from the time that I was born to the time that I got home from my mission, I moved 42 times. So I moved a lot. And as a result of that, I think there were good things about that. Like I became very adaptable to new circumstances. I was really good at meeting new friends, but I also had some pretty serious childhood trauma that I was dealing with, and so I had a hard time attaching securely, and I would make new friends, but I had a hard time holding on to them. And if I felt like people were getting too close, I would actually push them away or I would run away. And so I kind of had this pattern, but my childhood was also like really beautiful. I was pretty plucky. I was pretty resilient. My parents were gone a lot. They fought a lot. They were in the church, but they weren't like super active. So I really am kind of a convert to the church in many ways. But like when I didn't have a relationship with my mom as a kid because she was getting a PhD and she was directing theater projects, I decided to become an actor so I could have a relationship with her. And because of that, I was able to really have a beautiful relationship with my mom and meet adults, and that kind of expanded my horizons. So finding meaning and purpose as a kid was like, I always just wanted like that feeling of home. And I captured like little moments and glimpses of it. I don't want to ramble too much because I can ramble. So should I stop
Mhm.
there or should I just keep going?
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit more about in connecting to meaning and purpose, like where you felt that as a kid or even a young adult,
So
actually.
I'll tell one story that
Okay.
that really encapsulates that. So as an actor, I did outdoor dramas and I did horse stunts. So we did like fly mounts and stuff like that. And there was one night when we snuck onto the back lot where all the horses were like running wild. And we actually ended up, me and my buddy Taylor, we ended up riding bareback. And there was no bridle, there was no saddle. And it was in Ohio. So it was like these fields of fireflies. And we were just riding these wild animals through the woods. Like that was a moment when I felt so alive, like so connected to this animal and to like nature and to beauty. And so moments of meaning would show up for me in just moments of beauty with nature or with people. But like deep inside my heart, there was this wound that I needed to heal from. And until I fully processed and healed that wound, I would continually search for meaning and purpose. So, I mean, I was a weird kid. I would sit around in cafes reading Carl Jung and writing poetry and thinking about the meaning of life, thinking that somehow I could solve it with my mind. And in the back of my head, I always wondered if the church would help me solve that problem. And I always kind of believed in the church, but I was smoking cigarettes. Like, I had addictions. Like I was not doing what the church taught. And so I also had this like big bundle of shame that kept me from wanting to reach out to the church to maybe answer some of those questions about what does life mean. And so I think I was existing for a long time during that period of my life in a bit of an existential crisis.
Wow, yes, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. So when you're talking about, sitting in a cafe reading Carl Jung, what age is that?
That's
What-
like 15,
that's
16.
15.
Yeah.
Got it. So kind of a seeker.
I'm a very curious person. And as we'll get to later, that's also what caused me to like lose my faith in the church.
Got it. Was the seeking part of you.
Yeah.
Mm. And when you're talking about kind of smoking and doing things that are making you feel some sense of shame, what age is that for you?
I started smoking cigarettes at 15 years old.
Okay, so similar time frame.
Yep. Yep. And, you know, in retrospect, we know that nicotine can reduce people's sadness. You know, people reach for a cigarette when they're feeling sad. And I think I was just self-medicating as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Coping, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, if you had to kind of say how we're, if we're going to talk about religious orthodoxy, was there a time for that? When was it? And how is it not serving you during this time?
Yes. So
or serving you.
Or
If it was
serving you.
serving you,
Yeah.
we want to hear
Until
that
it
too.
wasn't,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
that is exactly my journey, because like so when I was back there doing those horse stunts, my grandfather, it was like at that time he was like kind of the closest thing to a dad that I had. I didn't really have a great relationship with my father at that time, and he passed away really suddenly from a lung disease. And so I made kind of the trek back to Utah. We buried my grandfather. It was really a pretty devastating time for me. Like, it was really hard to lose my grandpa. Like, I have a painting in my bedroom that he painted that's like a watercolor painting. I have pots all over my home that he threw. And he was a really important kind of mentor figure for me, even though I didn't spend that much time with him. And after he passed away, I really started thinking about like, what is the meaning of life? And that's when I ended up, after burying my grandpa, I made a second trek across the country. I drove in my little Nissan Sentra and I stayed at campgrounds. I mean, I pulled into town as this actor with hair down on my shoulders, wearing no shirt, showing up at my parents' house unannounced. They weren't even home. And so we had to call the bishop next door, Bishop Ayu, who ended up being like the bishop who saw me onto my mission. And so he came over, he brought a ladder, we snuck in the window, I took a bath in the hot tub. Like, I was crazy. I was a crazy kid. And I went to church that next week. And when I went to church, I met who was going to become my wife, Amy. And we just had this moment. Like, she turned around and she connected eyes with me. And I looked at her and she was like glowing. And it was my first time back at church. 7 months after that, I was serving a mission for the LDS church. So I went from a guy with hair down to his shoulders who was like going to Grateful Dead concerts and just being crazy to like being on a Mormon mission. And I'll tell you how Orthodoxy served me. It gave me structure. It gave me like discipline, right? And so I craved that. Like, as somebody who moved 42 times from the time I was born to the time I got home from my mission, like, I wanted a feeling of home. Like, I just wanted like a peaceful, solid existence, a place where I could call home. You know, I wanted the good life, right? That's what I wanted. And when I got converted to the church, what I saw was a path to the good life. I saw that I could have like this structure and this discipline and these sets of rules that would like tame my wild spirit, you know? And it worked. It worked for a while.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And then, so it worked, and you found this sense of kind of structure, as you say, purpose, that you were seeking. And then it started not working. At what point did it stop working for you?
And if you want to talk about your post-mission life and, you know, just really briefly, just kind of like how you went from the mission into what Mormonism kind of,
Yeah, you bet.
what role Mormonism played.
And I recognize this is a Mormon story, so I'm not going to go into great detail about the mission or any of that. But, you know, I think a few details are important because like 7 months after, 7 months after just being a crazy kid who was, smoking cannabis and all of these things and experimenting with drugs and having addictions, to being like a missionary was a pretty rapid transition. And within about 2 months of being in my mission, so I think it was like 2 or 3 months, I was actually made like a zone leader. So I was made a zone leader like really early. I was made a district leader pretty much right away. I was older. I was in my 20s. So like the experience of working with all of these young people, that was super meaningful to me. I loved empowering missionaries and just helping them feel like, that they could do their best work, and I really believed in the work. And when I got home from my mission, I actually continued to like drive around with stacks of Books of Mormon in my car, giving them out to people at gas stations. Some days I'd even still wear a suit. Like, I loved missionary work and I really believed in all of it. But it was that curiosity that I've always had that caused me to I would voraciously consume all of the literature about the church, because it was true. Like, I didn't think I would be harmed by digging deep into the details. But as I dug deeper and deeper, a few years into our marriage, I started to find some
So
things.
you married in the temple.
I got married in the temple. Okay, so back to that story. I told Amy before I went on my mission, I was like, I want to marry you. And if you still want to marry me when I get back, then you can just go ahead and plan it. So about 2 months before I came home, she reaches out to me and she was like, you still want to do this? I was like, let's do it. So 2 weeks after I got home from my mission, I was married in the temple to Amy. And about 10 months after we were married, well, probably 11 months after we were married, we had a baby. So
Yeah.
it was like a lot of life transitions really fast.
Right.
And I loved it. I felt like I was behind and I really wanted to like make up time, So I was
Right.
super happy with making really fast transitions.
Mhm.
But I have to say, Amy warned me before we got married. She said, like, we're so different. I don't know if a marriage between us would work. And I really wanted to be someone different than I was. And I have to say, like, I tried really hard to change core parts of who I was for the marriage and for the church. And I did that willingly. Like, no one made me do that. Amy was even like, you can get out of this if you want. I'm not so sure, but I was sure what I wanted. And the church really seemed to provide that for me.
Wow. Do you mind sharing one or two of those areas that you felt like you wanted to change
Well,
for the church, or that you kind of decided to give up, or
Tamp down.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that there was like a wildness to me that was beautiful and good.
Mhm.
There was like an open-heartedness. Like I
Yeah.
was always meeting new people and talking to strangers. And I think I kind of narrowed that part of myself to be very focused on just bringing people into the church, as opposed to this kind of openness where there's no agenda and all you're doing is just exploring like this person's story and learning from them. I felt like there was an openness of heart, like an openness of spirit that I did tamp down and narrowed to kind of fit within the paradigm of the church.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think I became, like, as a person, I think I became a little grumpier, like a little sharper, a little more withdrawn, because it was not like open, free access to your soul anymore. It was like, yeah.
Sounds like a little bit less expansive and broad-minded, maybe a little bit more narrow-minded.
It was. And it was narrow-minded, but on purpose, because it was like, if this is true, then it's what matters, right?
Yeah,
If
you're
this is
drilling
true,
deep, right?
it really matters. And because of my history of shame, I also felt like I had a lot of work to do to redeem myself. And I mean, one story that I would love to share is just a moment before the mission, if that's okay. Are we spending too much time on this?
You're great.
Were you
You're
okay?
doing great. Your
We're-
pacing's amazing.
Okay. So I when Amy, my former spouse, and I were dating, I kind of hit this moment where I had quit smoking. I had left all those things behind, and like my car still smelled like cigarette smoke, and like I still smelled like cigarette smoke. And I just felt like I was permanently broken, just to be honest. Like I just felt like irredeemable. And I told her that. I said, I just don't know if I'm ever going to get fixed, and I don't feel worthy of someone like you. And I'll remember this moment for the rest of my life. Like we were down in my parents' basement, and when I told her that, she just looked at me and she just leaned over and kissed me. It was the first time she had ever kissed me. And that was all that she had to say. And she just believed. She believed in me, and she gave me everything. She married me. She gave me children. She gave me her faith. And that was like the most beautiful gift. And even though she's still in the church and she and I are on different paths, like I will always be so grateful for the gift that she gave me.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of like unwinding all of the shame and all of the brokenness and just being redeemed. And I laid a lot of that on the Savior at the time, but I would still have thoughts from my former life that I felt like were unworthy,
Right.
and that was really hard. I felt like I will never stop having these thoughts, no matter how hard I work, no matter how much I do, no matter how good I am, no matter how perfectly I obey the rules. Like I will still always have the remnant of this life that I, at that point, really regretted.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of that quote, "Wherever you go, there you are." Kind of that unworthiness and that sense or feeling of brokenness following you, even into kind of the church, this as you're finding stability or some of those things, right? That
For sure.
you were craving or really wanting for yourself in your life.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, that desire for like home and stability that I had as a kid, I have to say I found it in the church. Like I found a steady group of people that I could connect with. I found a sense of community. I found a set of beliefs that I could just lay all of my questions on. You know, I could just hang all of the important questions about life on this set of beliefs. It was all figured out for me, you know? And there was a beautiful safety and comfort in that I just craved like deep in my soul. And it did give me a lot of meaning and purpose until it all started to unravel.
Yeah. So you have now years, are they years of kind of purpose and meaning with the church that until, and then tell us how that kind of went, the unraveling, what it looked like.
I mean, at first, it was just me being super curious and digging deeper and deeper and deeper into church history and facts. Like, I was that annoying person in Sunday school who was like, I know the answer to that. I know the Jewish, I know the Hebrew word for that and its root. And, I just wanted to be so smart and so,
Yeah.
just have all the answers. And so that just caused me to dig and dig and dig. But then you start to find out things that you didn't know. Like, I actually didn't even know about Joseph Smith's polygamy at the time. And I didn't know about like a bunch of other facts about the church. And they were kind of astounding to me. And the problem is I would bring him to Amy, and her dad was like an institute director. So she had already been taught like all of the kind of nuanced history of the church. She's like, yeah, of course, you didn't know that. And so it was hard though, because I was like, no, I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know any of this stuff. I just knew what was in like gospel principles and a little bit of what was in gospel doctrine. And then I was just continually learning, but I didn't have a lifelong immersion in church history and in church teachings.
Right.
So
So the more you learn, the more it starts to unravel.
yes. And then it's like this beautiful sense of home starts to be threatened. And so you start to compartmentalize, right? You start to say, I'm going to take, it's the shelf you build, right? You just take it all and you just say, no, I'm going to resolve my cognitive dissonance by putting this stuff over here. It has an answer. A lot of smart people who I really respect and who are great mentors to me, they believe this stuff. They seem to know more about it than I do. And you kind of start to lean on other people. And I really leaned on Amy and other people in my life. And that's when, so I have this like narrowed focus, this limited sense of self. And then you start to take away that natural sense of curiosity, and you start to push more and more of the answers of life and what it all means, and even answers to hard questions onto other people. And I felt like I was losing myself.
Right, right. So the more you're kind of leaning on and looking to other people and their thoughts or how they rationalize or how they kind of are working things through, the more you start to feel a disconnect from
Yeah.
you.
And I think like a big milestone in all of this was shortly after the financial crisis, I lost a business. I had like a pretty catastrophic business loss. I had clients in real estate. Real estate was hit super hard, and it was brutal, because as a Mormon man, like a lot of my sense of purpose was in my ability to like provide for my family. And so, all of the shame from my childhood and decisions I made when I was younger, they all kind of came back around. As I then lost a business, it was like I was a failure in every way. And I have to say, during that time, like, I started entertaining thoughts of self-harm. And I actually thought that maybe my family would just be better off without me. Like, they could just have someone who believed, they could have someone who could make money, and they wouldn't be stuck with me, who was like so complicated and a failure.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But I do have to say, one of the reasons why I'm like really honored to be on this show, John, is Mormon stories actually saved my life. During that time when I thought this world might be better off without me, a big part of that was I just didn't know how to navigate having doubts and not fully believing in the church and still wanting and needing to be in it because it was such a sense of home for me. It was everything to me.
Yeah.
All my friends, all my family, my children, like everything, my community, all of it was built in that. And so I remember the episode when John talked about baptizing his son and how he kind of navigated that. And I was a Mormon Stories listener back then. This was back in the super early days of Mormon Stories. But it made me feel like I wasn't alone and that I wasn't crazy for questioning these things.
Yeah.
And that I didn't have to keep just leaning on what all of these people, it's okay, don't worry, it'll all be figured out. It all makes sense. You're just not smart enough to understand it. Like those ideas, I could start to let them go. And there were people who had really nuanced understandings of church history who would come on John's show and who some were still in the church, some were gone, but it was like, finally we were having an adult conversation about it, about all the nuances. But that episode, when you talked about how you navigated baptizing your son, even though you had your doubts, that episode like saved my life. I listened to that and I had hope and I felt like I could do this.
Before the episode, you felt what?
I felt hopeless. I felt like a failure, irredeemable. And like, I can't do this,
Couldn't do what?
I could not navigate pretending to believe in the church, even though a deep part of me didn't.
So you had lost your, so I mean, you married Amy, you had some kids, you had your business kind of unravel. And then it sounds like your faith was kind of starting to unravel too.
Yes. All of that at the same time.
And then the baptism's coming up. And so you're wondering, it's just like you're feeling trapped, like there's no escape. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, the only escape that I could think of at that time was self-harm.
Because what were the two things you felt trapped between? You've mentioned this several times and it's always been very heartfelt. And I've never really asked you, what were the two things you felt trapped between?
The truth that was starting to bubble up inside of me and the evidence that the church may not be true, that I might not be living according to my own sense of values, that I actually changed my personality and who I was to fit inside this box. And then the paradox of it is the box gave me a lot of joy and a lot of peace, but it also didn't feel like it fit my whole soul inside. And so just feeling like now that I have these children and this wife and this whole life, like, how do you unwind all that? You can't just walk away from all of that, but how do you be true to yourself? How do you like speak up that I have concerns, and how do you find your voice in that?
Yeah. So how did this unraveling time and it sounds like you're in deep suffering, right?
Absolutely. Like the deepest, most profound depression of my life. And at that time I turned to video gaming. I was addicted to video gaming for a long time. And I just found any escape, any outlet I could to just get away from reality. And I had massive cognitive dissonance. And I think I was I wasn't diagnosed, but I probably could have been diagnosed with chronic depression at that time.
Okay. And amidst all this, how would you say it impacted your sense of meaning and purpose? The unraveling
I
part.
had none.
So it unraveled.
It was gone. And the beautiful moments that I experienced when I was young of just being wild and free, those were gone too.
Oh,
I lost all of that. So I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, all I had to really live for was trying to provide for my family. And my ability to do that was being taken away. But shortly after that, after I rediscovered hope, that's actually when I started working for the LDS Church.
So, and just so I understand, so on the one hand, you're realizing the church isn't true. On the other hand, I'm guessing you're realizing that if you bail on the church, you're going to be viewed as a failure. You're going to break the deal with Amy. You're going to disappoint friends and family in the community. And you just felt between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, for sure. And I wouldn't say that I was realizing the church wasn't true. I would say I was realizing there's a whole lot more to the church than I originally suspected.
Okay.
I don't know that I still believed it was a valid explanation of the world, just not in the way I used to think. And I mean, honestly, for a long time, my way of explaining it was I just believed we were living in a simulation, and that like a lot of the stuff that contradicts the church's narrative was like put there as a test. That was the only way I could wrap my head around the whole thing, because giving up on believing was just not an option, or being a believer.
And so the breakthrough that got you out of that depression and some of the suicidal ideation was just that there was a third way between
Yes,
throwing it all away and believing it all literally.
exactly.
And the third way, how would you describe that?
It was a more nuanced approach.
Okay.
It was an eyes wide open approach. Just take all this history, take all this stuff for what it is, keep being curious, keep digging into it, and suspend disbelief. I would say suspend my disbelief, doubt my doubts, right? But like hold on to the faith, but also don't just hang the answers on someone else smarter than me knows the answer to this. Keep digging down. That's where I ended up, and that's kind of the mental space I was in while I worked at the church.
And then Margie, I love that you're bringing out just this idea that, well, that you brought Dave to this idea that the church filled a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, but then when that imploded, it left you both without your original self and without the church to provide the meaning and purpose. Or were you to say something, Margie? Sorry.
Oh, no. I was going to say, so it sounds like you had these moments of just extreme despair. Is that right? Just
That
like
is right.
a real depression and feeling of lostness. And so out of that, did this nuanced approach, is that where this nuanced approach was born?
Yes, that is so well said. You should be telling my story.
No.
That's so well recapitulated, summed up. Like that's exactly right. And in that period of more like nuanced way of operating, that's when I went to work for the LDS Church. And a little ways into that journey, and I enjoyed working for the church. I came from a background of just kind of, I was involved in some startups, and, I had my own business for a while. So like, I was pretty like type A, like, I could like grind in and get things done. So they gave me some projects. I got them done pretty quick, and quicker than they thought. And, my boss at the time, Mark Tuttle, he had some budget, and Ali Isom came to him and said, we need some budget for this project. It was like a revamp of Mormons and gays. They were like, she was asked to take a look at that project and like revamp that website. And Mark said, you can have this budget that I have, but you also need to take on Dave, and I want him to collaborate with you. And so I kind of fell into the opportunity to work on this project, revamping Mormons and gays. And that became like a beautiful project I worked on that gave me a lot of sense of meaning and purpose. Like as a kid, I was an actor, so I was around gay people a lot. Like I didn't think of them as like any different than any other human being. Like honestly, I didn't even, and in my time in the church, I don't know that I really even noticed it. Like I wasn't paying attention to it. And like, I'm not gay, so it wasn't like an experience that I had sat around thinking about very much. But then when I was given this assignment, like the first thing I wanted to do would be like, well, what's this like for them? And so we went on kind of a tour where we did all these focus groups. We talked to people who are like in the church and out of the church, and spouses and parents and all of these people across the country. And through that, like just hearing all of these like heart-wrenching stories about people who are trying to make their faith work with their sexuality. And that was like, I really wanted to like help these people to find healing and to find a place where they could call home. I knew the church had given me that at some point, and I wanted to help them find that. And that really became a driver of finding meaning and purpose during my time in church employment, for sure.
Okay. So now you have kind of this, another relationship with meaning and purpose in the nuance realm.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's
Okay.
exactly right.
Got it.
And helping LGBT people.
That's
like,
right.
That's a real need.
Yes.
Yeah.
Within the space. So you're feeling like you're actually healing and helping a space that you love and care about.
Absolutely. And it wasn't a space that I really even thought of before, but
Yeah.
once it was brought to my attention, and once I saw like the pain, and it was like a particularly hard problem, because like the church's core teachings and doctrine are like, diametrically opposed to like a healthy, I mean, I'll just say it, like a healthy LGBTQ identity is not congruent with like the core teachings of the church. Like I mean, it's, you cannot fully express like that aspect of your humanity. And like I met many people who were just living like a life of celibacy. And I even met church employees who were gay and living a life of celibacy and being single. And it was a population that was totally invisible to me before. But it was like, to me, that's like one of the hardest things you could ever like ask somebody to do.
Yep. So did you feel like another crisis was brewing, or did you feel kind of around that topic with you as you were talking to people and seeing kind of the church's stance on that and then the suffering? Or at this point, or is your experience mostly like, I can do some good here? I think I can do some good.
Oh, absolutely. I can do some good here, because I figured like, okay, I see where you're at, and I can see where you're at, and I can see how we could like find common ground, And part of that was, like we created like a glossary of terms for general authorities for like, we put words in there like cisgender, and you know what I mean? Like, what are the definitions of all of these terms and what do they really mean? And then we looked at peer reviewed literature. We met with a few college professors who had this area of expertise, and we gathered best practices, and we kind of distributed those among the leadership. We also gathered a ton of stories so that we could put like a human face on it, and so that it was real. And I was super proud of that work, and it was well received, and we a team of us came up with this recommendation basically to, the old website. This is ancient history. Most people won't remember the old website. It looks like I'm doing something else here. I didn't mean that. I just
Texas Longhorns. That's the
Texas Longhorns.
Go Longhorns.
The old website. So the old website was Mormons and Gays, and this is what this was for. We dropped the 2 S's, so it was Mormon and Gay. And the idea was, you could be both, and now I have like mixed feelings about that promise, because I don't know. I don't know if you can really be both. But at the time that felt very invigorating. Like I really felt like we could help people see how they could be both. And yeah, absolutely. That was definitely a driver of meaning and purpose. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, brilliant. So what happened? So at what point did that meaning and purpose, was there another breakdown? Was there another, take us through that? Or did it morph into something else? Take us through the kind of meaning and purpose.
I mean, my curiosity just led me to keep learning. And I read books like Thinking Fast and Slow, where I learned about selection bias. I learned about all of the like cognitive errors of the mind. And I kind of could, I mean, this is, I don't know if this is appropriate, but, your episode, Margi, was like so powerful. And when you talked about like the church has these sets of teachings with a promise, right? If you do this, you will have this result, right? There's that like promise. And I know like I was in that paradigm. I had this like one paradigm to see the world. But I think what was really starting to happen to me during that time was I was assimilating a bunch of different paradigms for seeing the world. Like another book that was really impactful to me was The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. And at the end of that book, he coins the term meme, which is like a little social packet of information that's transmissible and obeys the same laws of like selective pressure as genes do. And I just started to see that like all these little messages that we were crafting in communications, they were like little memes, and that I had memes running in my head. So I was just continuing to discover like new paradigms, new mental models that helped me to see myself and my situation, I think, with like clearer eyes, because I could see it through multiple perspectives. Like I had the Mormon way of seeing my life, but I also was starting to take a look at my life a little bit more objectively, and starting to look at it through the lens of like attachment issues or cognitive errors. And so they're just like more and more, I just found that like secular and a broad variety of paradigms for understanding reality was a more useful tool to understand what was really happening in the world versus having to just fit everything into this one paradigm.
Got it. Yep. Yeah. Should we check in with
So you
Carah
started
really
so you
quick?
started to be more expansive in your thinking again, which it sounds like you kind of started out that way.
Yeah, it was like,
Exactly.
woo.
It's like the seeker comes back and you start kind
Yes.
of.
You would beat it down a little bit or turned it off.
Yes.
And it sounds like it just leaked out, or
It leaked out.
It wouldn't be fully suppressed.
My gosh. And during this time, like, we should check in with Carah, but last thing I'll say about that, like, during this time, I would be sitting in, meetings with our executive director, who's a member of the 70, and I would like quote Richard Dawkins about memes and stuff. Like, I was pretty open about being kind of part secular and part religious.
Yes.
I think they found it useful. I mean, I think having these multiple ways of seeing things was useful for the work we were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carah.
Yeah. I just wanted to give a shout out to all of our super chats in the YouTube. Anyone who wants to throw some money at the podcast, thank you so much. JC said, Mormon Stories saves lives. Thank you, John, Margi, and team. So glad to hear that you were able to get through that phase and that you're with us today still, Dave. So the only other thing that I'll add is, how many times have we heard a Mormon Stories interviewee think back to their nuanced phase and go, oh, I can do some work here. And in fact, they were not able to do the work they thought that they could do. They tried, but sometimes we get exhausted in the spaces when we're trying to go against such a big system. But I still, of course, want people to get to work in whatever places that they can. So anyway, I'm loving this. So thanks for, you're being so honest and vulnerable too. So that's hard to do as is. So thanks, Dave.
Oh,
That's the piece from me though.
Yeah. Thank you, Carah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you're now in this nuanced place. You're working at the church, and you're also seeking and, looking at your life and how you're relating to your life, and even religion and your relationship to the church from a lot of different perspectives. So where does that lead?
that leads to me ultimately. It was the conference that was in the fall of 2018. And it was, Mormon and Gay had launched. We had just also done the 40th anniversary celebration on the Revelation on the Priesthood, which was like a concert with Gladys Knight. And we were able to like say the names of like people like Green Flake in the conference center, which felt like a huge achievement. And I was a little part of that. And I was really
Who is that
grateful.
for our viewers who don't know.
Yeah.
Listeners
Oh,
who
I'm
don't
so
know.
sorry. Green Flake was a slave who was paid to Brigham Young for tithing. If I have that history correct.
And did they also talk about Elijah Abel?
Elijah Abel, yeah, we mentioned Jane Manning James. We mentioned all of these names
And
in that
that's
space.
that was an accomplishment. Why? For those who have no idea.
Oh, I'm so sorry for
That's good.
I mean, the original conception of that as a celebration was this kind of forward-looking. It was this like forward-looking, we're all one people, isn't it? Everything's okay, kind of an approach.
Is it okay backing up? Like,
Yeah.
obviously, the church withheld the priesthood from people of African descent, Mormons of African descent, forever, for like 150 plus years. 78.
Well, they had it at first. There were bishops. There were like Joseph Smith called people as bishops.
Right.
So
okay. So in the early years of the church,
Yeah.
Joseph Smith was okay ordaining
Yeah.
people of African descent to the priesthood. Brigham Young takes it away.
Correct.
The church has 150 years of
Right.
racist exclusionary policies. 78, they bring it back, but apparently there was still a PR problem, or what? Or perception problem?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was institutional racism and in the church, and there's teachings about like, skin getting lighter as you get more righteous. Like there's stuff like in there that is just challenging. I mean, for anybody who has more melanin in their skin, there's stuff to confront in the core church teachings that's challenging. And, that doesn't mean that people can't believe in the church or choose to interpret it in other ways. But, this original 40th anniversary celebration, it was originally conceived as kind of a looking forward. And there was a wonderful group of Black sisters and I think there were a couple guys involved that really wanted to create this kind of like cultural celebration where we like really owned the history. And I felt like I could have just a little bit of an influence, and I had meetings with Correlation, and we kind of got some of this stuff like through, and it was really meaningful to me to be able to have a small contribution and us being able to like recognize the pain.
Is it fair to say that people for decades have been calling for an apology, and that that maybe the church isn't big on apologies, but that this was something that wasn't quite an apology, but would at least try and address some of those concerns?
Oh, no doubt. And you'll all remember the morning of the spoof apology, and there were people who thought it was real. And
you were at the church at the time.
I was working for Church Public Affairs at the
Jonathan
time.
Streeter did the spoof apology.
And I knew people personally who originally thought that it was like legit. And that was so like momentarily healing, and like the whiplash for those people as they realized it was a prank was just devastating, absolutely devastating. So yeah, you could clearly say that there was a desire for an apology, no doubt. But yeah, the church, that's not something that the church does. So
this event.
Yeah, I mean, that was like the last big thing I worked on. And it was super meaningful. It was a beautiful thing. But really, like at the end of my, it was October 2018 conference, and there was a speech given from the pulpit about the proclamation on the family. And like I got a bunch of texts, and like I had some contacts at places like Encircle, and they were seeing like intakes going up, and just I kind of started to feel like I was working to try to create this space that was never really going to be safe for these people. And that was really hard to confront. And I think that was when I was like, I don't think I can keep doing this. I don't think I can keep working for this organization.
Margi, you have to forgive me. I'm geeking out a little bit that he worked for the church. So I'll just ask one more question. Were you at church headquarters when the November 2015 policy came out?
I was.
And then were you there when it was rescinded? And do you have any
I
reflections
was not.
on
I was
either?
not when it was rescinded.
So when it came out, what was that like? What was that like for you?
I mean, we were working on the revamp of Mormon and Gay when that policy came out, and it set us way back. I mean, we just didn't see it coming. We didn't know about it, and it hit us out of nowhere. And honestly, like, I mean, just to be super honest with you guys, like I collapsed in the shower in tears, like in a little ball of tears after that policy came out. Like that was really, really hard. Just the pain, and like these people were real to me now. Like I knew a lot of people who this policy would affect. I had a dear, shout out to Rod Olson, my dear friend, who is an uncle. And, he was like, so where does that put me? He was like trying to make the church work. And he's like, where does this lead me? It was hard, and it was personal. I mean, not for me, but for people who I loved. And I saw that pain. But when that policy came out, like I felt like my personal resolve to try to bring the sides of this together was only strengthened.
Because you imagine these church employees just being like, whatever the prophet says, we're good with it. And then everyone just moving to be supportive and feeling supportive. But you're saying that, I mean, you're an example of people that would be working on the payroll that would not be feeling good in their jobs when certain decisions got made. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It was hard for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
You weren't alone in feeling awful about that sort of thing.
All of us, like we had a conference call with the people who were working on the project, and like there were people on that call who were in tears. And, it wasn't like, I don't think that there was a feeling of like, there wasn't like questioning the church or saying this, it was just like, oh, this is so hard. Like these people are already like laboring under so much, and they already have like such a hard time making this whole thing work. And this is just like one more layer of pain on top.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you persist because maybe you can make a difference.
Absolutely.
And ease the pain a little bit.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Margi.
Yeah.
I don't mean to derail
It
you.
reminds me so much of, so many of us at one point or another where, we are in more of the nuanced space with this hope or intention to change things from the inside and to try and have a go at that.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. And I, deep in my heart, like I loved the Mormon culture. Like my family has like a rich heritage with the Mormon culture. Like, my grandfather, he served missions for like his whole life. He had 9 kids. Almost all of his kids serve missions. They're all active in the church now. You know, there's like the George Biesinger Hall in New Zealand, which is like a little church college that was named for him. So like my family had like a rich heritage in the church. And so I loved everything about the church. And you know what, in many ways, I'll say this, like, even though we've talked about some of the challenging things about the church, I think it really works for some people. And for those people, like, you know, I don't want to take that away from them if it's working. You know, if they're living a life where they can make that work, I don't want to be someone who walks in and takes that away if it's working for them. It didn't work for me.
Yeah. And when did that become really clear for you? Was there a moment where now you're nuanced? So you've kind of been through it in a way before, right? Where you kind of lost a bit of that meaning and purpose, right? And then you hit this low point. Does it happen again?
So coming out of church employment
Yeah.
was really helpful for me because I didn't have like, I mean, look, I'll just say it for what it is. Like, I mean, they were cutting my paychecks. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to question too deeply an organization when it's like your employer. And so I just didn't open my mind to that. But once I was kind of outside of church employment, I was able to just kind of take the blinders off a little bit and really start to openly question a bit more and think more about like who I wanted to be and what I wanted my life to be. And so that like process of open questioning, that led me, I don't know, like, I guess I'll just share the experience. Like, so I had an experience with psychedelic mushrooms and I didn't take very much. It was like 2 grams and I went for a little walk in the woods. And when I was out in the woods, this was when I was still married, but I was no longer working for the church. When I was out on this little walk in the woods, like I felt that sense of wonder that I had felt as a child, you know, riding on the back of a horse through fields of fireflies. Like I felt so connected to nature. I felt so connected to my family. And I felt this sense of like awe and wonder. And that was like, it was transcendent, you know, it was just beautiful. And that is like the deepest source of meaning that I've ever discovered, is just being present in these beautiful moments where you feel this sense of just glorious awe, open wonder at it all. You feel so small, but yet you feel so big because you're connected to so much more than you.
Yeah.
After that experience, the next day I was.
Can I ask a question about before the experience?
Sure.
So you had left the church, you had lost that meaning and purpose. Did you turn to psilocybin or mushrooms as a way to try and fill that hole again, you know, that had been missing, or not? Or like talk about the meaning after leaving the church, and if there was any way a connection between what you were trying to fill or seek in that mushroom experience.
I hadn't really left the church at this point. I mean, I'd left church employment.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I'd left church employment. Yeah. Okay. But I had not left the church. Okay. And so I think I had a relatively solid sense of meaning and purpose at this time. It wasn't fully developed, but I even like when I was working in the church, my sense of meaning and purpose was 100% tied to these like projects I was working on. You know, between projects, that would kind of dry up for me. But when I had something I could throw my whole soul into, it was there again. And so that was a big part of why it was hard for me to walk away from church employment. Like I felt like I was able to work on some things that were really impactful and that were very meaningful to me. But I was finding that outside. I was finding that in my career. I was finding that in nature. So I think I would say I didn't lose my sense of meaning and purpose after leaving church employment. I would say that I started to really plant some seeds through like healthy personal practices that would ultimately come to fruition. And one of those moments, you know, I mean, it's funny we're talking about a mushroom experience because the way that mushrooms grow, right? Like they have this like long kind of almost like gestation period where the mycelial network all connects, you know, and then suddenly overnight they like pop up out of ground and it's all this explosive growth. And so I feel like during this time after I left church employment, like I was just planting the seeds.
You were like a mushroom.
I was like a little mushroom. Oh, sorry, I bumped the mic.
Right.
Yes. And
You
so
popped up like a mushroom.
I
well,
did.
no, well, he was, and he was like, he was doing a lot of work, it sounds like, under the surface too.
Yes, groundwork. Starting to so I had meditated for 10 years, but I really started taking my meditation practice far more seriously. I started to take my physical health far more seriously. I just decided that I wanted to like build a really good life for myself.
Wow.
And I started to get friends, like real good friends. You know, you mentioned Christian Moore, like Clint Martin. I have to say, like, Clint Martin is such an amazing human being. And he was like such a good friend and still is like such a good friend for me, like right when I needed it. Like he was a godsend, you know, and he and I would talk like every day. And he really having this like kind of group of people that I felt had unconditional positive regard for me helped me to really develop what I don't think I had had up to that point. And this really goes back to the beginning of the story, my childhood trauma. I had not fully dealt with that. Like I had learned to identify thought patterns and step away from them, but I had not fully processed that childhood trauma. And having others have unconditional positive regard for me, it really helped me and gave me permission to have unconditional positive regard for myself. And that's when I really started to do some of this inner work, which kind of culminated in one way in that mushroom experience.
Right. I can see that. So, okay, can I back up and go
Please.
kind of, so I'm kind of feeling like in the beginning of your story, right, with kind of meaning and purpose, that there's this desire to feel loved and seen, but you're experiencing a ton of instability. Is that right? But like meaning and purpose as a child was like you're connecting to aliveness, moments of just unbridled, feeling awake and alive to the moment. Is that right?
Absolutely right. And I would say during that period, another really important part of the picture is I did not have a secure attachment style.
Right.
And so a lot of the kind of turmoil was self-generated too. Like we moved around a lot, but like I also just bounced around between friends and groups and activities and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I have kind of the church kind of comes in, right? And meaning and purpose on a level becomes stability.
Yes.
Focus.
Yes.
Right?
Discipline.
Answers. This idea, yes.
Truth.
You can connect
it's all clear cut.
Right. The answers and even the building, probably the good life includes the building of your family. You have
Absolutely.
Amy, you have your children, you have, right?
Yes.
And then
I have callings. You know, I have a job. Like I've got, like I'm providing for family. Like everything is back on track again.
Right.
And the church helped me tremendously. Like the church was so helpful to me during that period. I think that young people need structure and they need a framework. And I think the church does provide a helpful structure. I just think it comes along with this like bundle of shame and ideas that can be like mentally limiting. So I've decided that the benefits are not worth the cost when it comes to the church for me.
Now.
But
at the time,
I really needed it.
Yeah.
Like I could have also gotten the same things through like going to boot camp or, you know what I mean? Joining the military, which I also thought of doing, but like I needed that structure from somewhere. And that's where I found it was in the church. And I'm very grateful.
Right. And then amidst that, you have kind of this loss that happens and a kind of crisis of meaning and purpose and self almost, right? And then it feels like you move into that kind of nuance and that's your church, like when you go to work for the church, right? And then meaning and purpose becomes almost like showing up for people.
Yes.
Trying to create change, make a better life for people within this paradigm, right? And that becomes kind of meaning and purpose. And now, just to bring us up to date, right? It feels like now you've left the church. And now what I see is you're kind of tending to yourself, tending to kind of rebuilding a little bit. Would you say you're kind of rebuilding and creating a world with people who see you, who offer you this attachment and love, and you're meditating and you had a mushrooms experience that brought you almost like an integrated self experience. It brings you back to a time when you remember this core piece of yourself that maybe you left a little bit. Is that right? And then also what brings you, that it might bring you alive here now as well. Is that right?
It's so right. And I'll go back to what you talked about in your podcast, which is coming home, and I think that I was able to find home, finally, the good life, like in me, like find a place where I can have like inner peace, where like my inner world matches my outer world. And I feel like congruent, like a whole person who can live authentically in the moment, right? And have nothing to fear from the moment and have no spinning thoughts, right? But like it really, the kind of final chapter of the story after, finding so much meaning and purpose in serving others, like I have found so much meaning and purpose in serving me and in building me. And I homeschool my daughter right now, and I would not have had the capability of doing that 3 years ago. I could not have juggled all of the things that I'm juggling right now. But, I have to say, I mean, this might sound crazy and it might sound like bold or overconfident, but like there is a very beautiful sense of ease that can come into life when we're not fighting so hard for control, when we are just kind of letting go a little bit and recognizing with really accurate reality, like what am I actually in control of? And just tweaking those little knobs, and then just having kind of an openness and just kind of showing up as you and like continuing to build yourself from within in a way that's super sustainable, like showing up for those things. It just doesn't take as much willpower anymore. When we can make them a little bit more like automatic, like just breathing, it becomes like the good life becomes natural, like it just flows out of you. It's just like woven by your soul in a way that you don't even fully understand. But there's a part of me that is creating these like beautiful moments of presence with people who I love, connections, friendships, moments with myself, through meditation. And I have like a kind of a chanting practice that I do. But like these moments are like woven by the deeper me, and in a way that I don't know that I could consciously put together. And I just have to trust that. And trusting it so far, it's kind of going back to that wild me, that wild me that was open and free. But I think I've held on to the structure and the discipline that helps me to create a more sustainable wildness, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Can I ask you a question? And go back just for a minute, because I love you now talking about the good life and what it looks like for you. If we were going to talk about rebuilding, you mentioned some things already, but I want to just go a little bit deeper just to make sure we got everything. Okay. So you kind of talk about the mushroom and kind of doing all and planting seeds for a while. And I feel like you mentioned a meditation practice. You mentioned psilocybin during that. You mentioned surrounding and meeting some of the people who are still in your life today, like a family of sorts, right? And you mentioned
you guys.
Oh, shucks, Steve. But like Clint in there, right? And Christian
Yeah.
Moore in there.
For sure.
And so what other pieces were key to your rebuilding? If you've left, was that pretty much it? Was there anything you left out? What?
Yeah, I wonder how comfortable you are talking about the end of your marriage, in the sense that I think some marriages survive a faith crisis and some don't. And I don't know to what extent the conscious decision to end your marriage was an important step
Absolutely.
in your development. And then I just want to go right on with what
Yeah.
Margi's saying is kind of an enumeration of the most important elements of your
Rebuilding.
reconstruction.
That's great.
Yeah.
But it seems like those are going to weave into the story of you ending your relationship with Amy. And I've been your friend as that happened. So I've got my own kind of witness to that, but I want to hear you talk about it first.
Yeah.
If
And
that's okay, Margi.
That sounds great.
so, I mean, really that decision, I was not looking to end my marriage. Like I was not. I honestly, like, I love Amy. I still love her. I don't love her in the same way, but like, she's been the best friend that I've ever had. She's like right there. She's one of my very best friends to this day. And so that was not something that I entertained lightly. So after my mushroom experience, I was feeling this sense of like openness and connection. And I had not felt that very often. And so, I mean, this is like a super personal story, but like we were just laying there snuggling, and we hadn't done that much. Like we had drifted apart, even though we loved each other very much. And she just asked me the question. She said, you seem different. Like you seem more like open and like loving. She was like, tell me about that. And one of the things that I realized through my mushroom experience was that like truth has power. Truth has a real power. And I could not lie to her. And so I told her what I had done. And I told her why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And that kind of precipitated the events that led to the ending of our marriage. But, you know, ultimately, one more story I can share is, I mean, I remember this day very vividly. I was sitting on the edge of the bathtub, and she was sitting in the master closet. And she just looked up at me and she just said, "You're going to break me." And I was like, I can't do it. And I just decided like, okay, I guess I'll break instead. And there was this deep part of me that was like, that's not right. Like it's not right for me to break myself to spare her that. And I just realized like I had to choose me. Like my life was worth living. I'm so sorry that caused her pain. I never wanted to cause her any pain. Sorry. But I did. I chose me. And I think that was like one of the healthiest choices I ever made. And, you know, up until that point, I didn't really have like an authentic relationship with my kids because frankly, I was lying to them about who I was and what I believed. And I just decided like, no more lies, like no more hiding. Like, let's just whatever is. And I'm okay with it. I don't know what will happen when I die, but I know that living right now is so beautiful. It's amazing.
Right.
And leaning into those experiences. So yes, that led to the end of the marriage. But
it's such a, we talk about the term anti-Mormon, sometimes it's thrown away loosely. The idea of choosing yourself, the idea of not sacrificing yourself for your marriage, you could almost say is an anti-Mormon concept. Because in Mormonism, I think we're taught marriage before self. So that's kind of a radical decision you made.
It was.
And it would be viewed as selfish.
Yeah.
In the Mormon context.
Yeah. And you know what? I think my kids had that very idea. I think that they felt like dad decided to get divorced from mom so that he could just kind of do whatever he wanted. You know, they don't think that now. But I think at the time, you know, and there was a time after Amy and I separated. So as we separated, like, you know, we kind of made an agreement when we entered this marriage that we would raise our children in the church. And so I really wanted to honor that, even though I couldn't honor it myself. And so I didn't fight her for custody or anything. I just said she could have full custody of the kids and she could raise them in the church. And I just kind of let that go. And there was a time period right after our separation when I really had very little contact with my children. And I wondered if I would ever have a relationship with my kids again. And that was really tough. It's totally different now. Like my daughter lives with me full time. You know, like I just went hiking on Sunday of Rock Canyon with my son. I've got a great relationship with my kids, but it's built on authenticity. It's like, it's a real relationship. So kind of going back to that moment of separation and me kind of choosing me. I think the way that I think Amy views it this way. I think the way we both viewed it was we were going different directions. Like our lives were just on a different trajectory and we had changed, like we had grown. Like how can we expect to, you know, we had known each other for 20 years at that point and we had both changed in many ways, but we just had different roads we were going on. And I felt like we were holding each other at the crossroads. You know, we were clinging to one another and holding on to each other at the crossroads. And neither of us could go down our road. We had to have the courage to let each other go so that we could part ways, and it's not a full parting. Like we're still connected to each other, but we're walking our own roads now. And that feels so satisfying.
Yes, there is so much wisdom, I think, in what you're talking about. And it feels like when you describe that moment, you being on the side of the bathtub and was she in the closet, is just like this moment of recognition of like where you each are, where she says you're going to break me. And then you initially wanting to give this thing, well, then I'll just break myself. Isn't that what you said? And then realizing, either way someone dies, to stay in that. It's her, it's you. Like there's a death going on. And I think we see that, right? We can look around and see marriages where people are together, but they're not really alive in that relationship. And so on some level, it's that setting each other free.
Yes.
That love gets to live on in a different form. It still exists, but you're kind of setting each other free. Is that right?
Absolutely. And there's nothing I want more for her than for her to find someone who like can give her what she needs and what she wants. Like that can like show up for her in the church and in ways that she needs someone to show up for her. I just couldn't do it and be me at the same time. It didn't work for me. It didn't, like, the church didn't give me the feeling of expansiveness and, like soul weaving that I'm experiencing right now. Like to find that, I really had to walk down some other roads. And so back to the original question, some of the things, I mean, I've read a ton of books, right? So I like reading a lot of books. So we can learn from experience, and that experience is the most powerful teacher, but you don't have to just learn from your experiences. Like you could take the distilled wisdom of an entire lifetime and just ingest it. That's like a miracle to me. The fact that we can read other people's wisdom. I love the Four Agreements. I love the Fifth Agreement. I love Eckhart Tolle. I love many works across the psychological literature, and as I've kind of been like dialing in my daily routines and practices and like my protocols and stuff, I spend a fair bit of time like digging into peer-reviewed literature, and like I have my little Zotero reference list where I keep all my notes. And so I've kind of made the good life like an area of study, and I'm like an N of one. Like I'm an experiment.
Right.
I am experimenting on myself constantly and tweaking things and dialing them in. But I would say like the core practices would be yoga. Like I love yoga. Yoga has made me feel like my body right now. Like I'm working on doing like, the iron cross on the rings and, handstands and planches and all of these things. And yoga was what opened that. Yoga was what made my body feel like whole again. Because I was very overweight at one point. I had a back surgery. Like I had some pretty serious health issues, and I lost the weight, but the weight wasn't really what mattered. Like I don't think weight matters. Like I've just found where I feel like healthy and whole as a human organism. Like we, first and foremost, like we're animals. Like we are Homo sapiens. You know what I mean? Like there may also be a soul. I hope there is, but first and foremost, like we're an organism, and we have to use best practices to care for the organism if we're going to feel emotionally and physically and mentally well.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm hearing kind of reading. I'm hearing yoga, bringing you back to your body, right?
Yes.
And what else would you say?
Meditation. Yeah, healthy eating. Like there's a bunch of little like health-driven protocols that I follow, but in terms of like finding meaning and purpose, I think
So you changed your diet. I mean, that's
Totally.
probably
You
significant.
did.
Oh yeah.
Maybe talk briefly about that.
I mean, intermittent fasting is a very powerful tool. I mean, you can go into this, metabolic state called autophagy, where you actually clean out old proteins. It has some anti-cancer benefits. So I've done fasts that are as long as like 2 and 3 days. And, I fast pretty much every day. I eat like a meal and a half a day. And really focusing on sleep. Like your eyes need to see sunlight in the morning, and your eyes need to see the sunset to properly set your circadian clock. These little tweaks to just how you live your life and living a life that's more in balance with nature and honoring that we are a physical organism first, that is like, it really goes a long way toward helping you feel well
Right.
and have energy.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Should we do a quick check-in with Carah? How you doing over there? How are things going in the comments? so
Crying. I'd
far?
rather not talk. Just kidding. A lot of the people in the comments are saying, I just threw up a bunch of comments on the screen as well. The people that needed to hear this today and other people who have been on the other side of the spouse that kind of divorced them and that things have all kind of worked out in the end. So everyone's really loving this discussion. Loving you, Dave. I am as well. So I'm feeling some feelings
Mhm.
that
What-
like
what
it's-
can you share about your feelings?
that they're there.
Yeah. Thanks, Carah.
Anyway.
Yes. I mean, one thing, okay, I'm going to just zip back and then zip forward. One thing that I do think is so powerful about you mentioning your story with your wife or your ex-wife with Amy.
Yes.
Just let her be a
Yeah,
human
she's a
being.
human. Yeah.
With Amy is just, that there's an initial pain point in the change of love, right? But also, and that your children had a point of view for a time that, may have been, I would imagine, hard for you, and you didn't see them as much. And that we go through these transitions, and also that they're oftentimes not there to stay.
Yes.
Right? That on the other side of that, because of who you are and because of you deciding to save yourself and also be honest and integrate yourself, you had those relationships with your children that you hadn't had did come to fruition. And I think that is an ultimately hope-inspiring, validating thing for people. Do you
Absolutely.
agree?
I
Yeah.
agree. And I feel so fortunate. Like things have gone well. Like life is good, and it's not always good. Like
Yeah.
there's actually so we naturally as human beings, like we go through cycles of ups and downs, and I think, in my past, kind of whether it was video gaming or smoking, I wanted to blunt the down. But really feeling the down and being comfortable with like melancholy and challenges and really letting those things like settle in, that is what sets us up for the highs too. And so sometimes when we try to just endlessly escape in ups, of course we end up with distorted behaviors like addictions, because we don't ever let ourselves come back down again and return to homeostasis. And so
Or we numb, I think you're saying, or we numb the lows.
we numb the lows
Right.
and we chase the highs, and we have to chase ever escalating highs in order to feel the same thing. Right.
Yeah.
And so just being comfortable, like, there's this song by Cat Stevens. It's Father and Son.
Mhm.
And I remember there was a day, like I just kind of laid in the tub and I listened to that song like 7 times and I just cried because I had to let my son go in order to ever have a relationship with him, and it was really hard. It was really hard to let him go. And there's no guarantee that it's going to work out okay. For some people out there, they may have let people go out of their lives and they may never return. Like there's no guarantees, and life doesn't actually owe us anything.
Can I just, as an observer of your life, as your friend, can I just say during that time, now, first of all, when you and Amy split, you were best friends. It wasn't like this acrimonious,
No.
Fighting where it unravels and then it blows up and then it's over. It's like you're watching, this is how I observed it. It's like you and Amy were watching the clock. It's like, well, we're going to love each other up until the very minute that this ends because we still love each other. And so it was like the parting of best friends that just knew that again, as you've already said, it was going to be healthier to live apart, kind of conscious uncoupling idea for the betterment of all. But then when it came to talking about the kids, Amy's awesome, but I mean, she, was and probably still is a very Orthodox believer. And my sense was, and I'm not trying to speak for her, was just that like for her being able to have a strong influence on the kids' religiosity was just very important to her. And this is where many, let's just say, divorces or divorce settlements can become very acrimonious because there's this battle over custody. And when you told me you were just letting go of that and giving her full custody, in my mind, my immediate reaction was like, whoa, don't do that. But then I thought about this concept I learned through acceptance and commitment therapy or secular Buddhism called dropping the rope. You can pull on that rope against the monster and the monster just pulls back. And so you pull harder and then the monster pulls harder back. And all that happens is your hands get bloody, your hands get calloused, both sides get exhausted, and carnage. This is every divorce I've ever heard of, where just you ruin your friendship, you ruin the relationship, you spend a gazoodle amounts of money, the lawyers win, and the kids get to watch their parents' relationship go up in smoke. And then it's just lose for everyone. And I thought it was such a masterful move. Not that Amy was being a bad actor. She was not.
Yeah, if we could tweak the metaphor and just say, instead of a monster on the other end of the rope, I had a goddess on the other end of the rope. Okay.
Yes. I wasn't saying Amy was the monster on the other end.
Yeah.
Thank you for the correction.
Sorry.
It was this idea of the other side of the rope being the battle for the children.
Yes.
The battle for the children.
Yes.
And you're just like, I'm going to drop the rope in terms of like us trying to decide the future of the children. Amy, I'm going to trust you. It was more of an act of love and trust.
I was going to say that's what's clear to me.
Yes.
Is that it's that through this difference that emerges is that you have a type of connection with Amy still. You still have a sense of love and regard, and she does for you. And in that moment, you decided to make an act of trust in her process.
Yes.
She may not have been there yet, but you were kind of saying in good faith, right? Is that right?
It's 100% right. And like, look, she warned me that we had some differences that may threaten our marriage before we got married. She told me before we entered that contract of marriage that she wanted to raise her kids in the church. And so a part of that was just me honoring like what she gave her life to. Like she gave her whole life up to be a mom and to have my kids. And like, I really wanted her to have a chance to just be able to do it her way, and that was part of why I just let go of that rope. I felt like she deserved it. And I did trust her with it.
Yeah. And that's that love and regard is you're thinking of her, you're feeling for her story, and you can see her story as at the same time that you're seeing yours. Something. And I think another thing that I had to come to realize was just, and this is in the Fifth Agreement, if anyone has read that. So there's the 4 agreements and then there's the Fifth Agreement.
Include that in the show notes.
Okay, perfect. It's great books. So you just come to realize that like everybody feels like the hero of their own story. But I think what I came to realize at that time was like, there are no heroes. There are no villains. Like all of us are just really complicated people, and we have moments of heroism and maybe we have moments of infamy, but like we're whole complicated beings, and no one is above doing things that are, that you wouldn't be proud of. Like I've done them many times, but it's the shame that we give ourselves rather than the learning. Like the shame clouds the picture, because really, if you look at it, like it's all just incoming data. When you do something that doesn't have the result you were looking for, rather than shaming yourself or treating yourself like you're suddenly the villain where you used to be the hero, just learning, like just observing what's happening and then changing your behavior as you can. Just do your best.
Yeah. Neutralize it instead of personalize.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask, I want to kind of go back for a minute, because what I'm realizing is, when we looked at kind of my story and loss and grief, it kind of showed up in a way that it was kind of all at once. Right. But to me, it feels like you're having more of pieces of grief and loss throughout your story. What is your relationship with grief and loss?
Aww.
And how do you show up for it and process it?
I felt deep and profound senses of grief and loss as a child because of trauma and because of abuse. And that was painful. And I know that, like, look, there are people in this world who are handed AK-47s when they're like 11 years old. Like, I know that my trauma probably, it's not like on the scale of trauma, I probably have tons of privilege.
But we don't compare trauma.
Okay. So, but my trauma was real to me.
Yes.
It was real to me, and it was hard for me, and it was painful, very painful. And I, as Eckhart Tolle talks about, which we've both read, like pain can awaken us, right? Because to continue to live in pain is not always an option for us. And I do think that my relationship to grief and to sorrow really led me to my meditation practice about 10 years ago. And that's when I realized, like, so because of the trauma of my childhood, I felt like I was living in a world where I couldn't trust people. And so that was kind of the core script I was running. And I had to like remodel my brain to believe, truly believe deep down, that I live in a safe world, that people can be trusted, that I can be trusted. And so as I have kind of flipped around, and it affects even like your neurotransmitter balance and all of these things, like it affects you biologically when you feel like this is a peaceful, safe world and I can attach to others securely. It totally changes the game. So before I was able to like securely attach, and when I felt like I was living in a dangerous world, like I feel like pain was a much more constant friend. And I feel like there were moments when I would create hell on earth for myself, where I would just get twisted into thoughts and speculation about the future and fears. And rather than just being present and being able to recognize like these thoughts aren't actually that useful, they're not really doing very much for me. But like when I was in a place before I could let that stuff go, I felt, I would say, like a lot more instances of pain in my life. And a lot of it was self-generated. But once
Right.
I was able to just kind of slowly, gently convince myself that this was a safe world and that I could let go of thought patterns that weren't serving me, then I still feel like pain. I still feel grief. Like I felt a tremendous amount of grief at the end of that relationship or at the prospect of losing my children. But I feel like when you can be present with that grief and that pain and just kind of like let it wash over you and not have to tell yourself a big story about what it means, about what it explains about you or about what it means about the future, you can just like feel it. It's still painful, but it's not as painful. And it
Right.
doesn't last as long. And rather than like fighting those emotions, just letting them like wash through you. And I know I'm probably regurgitating what I think everybody in this room probably knows this already, but it was like a very powerful discovery for me. And that came through reading books.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a powerful thing to actually feel yourself, that experience of here it comes. We don't block it. We just allow, and then you discover that
Yeah.
it can wash through. It reminds me a little bit what you're describing. It reminds me a little bit of the second arrow, John.
Mhm.
Just this idea of yes, there's pain in life, and that's the first arrow. But the stories that we tell about the first arrow and how we resist it or what we put our thoughts on or right that becomes a second arrow,
Mm.
a self-inflicted second
Yes.
arrow. And then now we're in like double suffering.
And all credit goes to No Rochetta and Secular Buddhism podcast that taught us that.
That's right.
We'll include that in the show notes. And I guess all credit goes to Buddha at the end of the
In-
day for that one.
In the end.
Mm.
That's right.
If Buddha ever existed.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned a few resources as we've that were important to you rebuilding. Are there any other books or things that were really pivotal ideas? What psilocybin, that was something that was, I feel like something that you mentioned that was important, meditation. Any other things that you would want to kind of set apart as, hey, here are some resources that were really helpful to me?
Yeah. I have one more, and it's kind of a recent one I've discovered. So, as we get to this place of presence, I think that we can start to view like all thoughts are the enemy. Like I just always have to be present. And if I'm thinking a thought, I'm not being present. But like the truth of it is we need to think. Like we need our ego. Like we need to be able to like think things through and plan. And so I feel like I'm this is just new to me, but I feel like I'm creating like a more helpful relationship with the planner part of myself, where I can kind of make plans, hold them loosely, and I can kind of like architect my time so that I spend my time doing things that are calculated to bring me moments of meaning and purpose and connection, right? And so whether that's showing up for myself, whether that's like furthering projects that I'm working on, like I'm in the middle of writing a book, and I'm writing a book with Christian Moore, and it's on how to get along with anyone, and like no one is like, it doesn't have like a deadline. It doesn't have like a certain time that it has to be done. But like I show up for that book every day and I write at least for an hour or two every single day. Like no one makes me do that, but being able to choose like habits and little activities every day that like build toward the kind of life that deeper part of ourselves imagines for ourselves, and like integrating the deep intuitive sense of me with the thinking part of me, and like kind of not getting the cart in front of the horse. So like sometimes the thinker brain thinks it knows it all, but there's like a deeper part of me that really sees the big picture. And that's the part that I want to be in charge. So there's another book by Ian McGilchrist. He talks about, it's called The Master and His Emissary. And he talks about some of the problems with our modern world are that we allow that this quantified kind of left brain type thinking that doesn't have the whole picture, but understands parts and pieces really well. We let that kind of thinking dominate our behavior and our activities. And that shows up in a personal life. It also shows up at scale when, we have like all these masks just distributed around the world, like they're falling into oceans, right? Like we're not seeing the whole picture, right? If we want to take care of the planet and each other and ourselves, like we can't just focus on little parts and pieces. We have to be able to see the whole picture and understand what it means. And so according to Ian McGilchrist's research, that the part of us that has a picture of that whole meaning is what, when I was a kid reading Carl Jung, we would have called like that archetypal self, right? Like those deep archetypes that reside within the psyche or the unconscious mind. And so trying to allow that part of myself to guide my actions through like a series of like planning and habits has really helped me to just have more moments that bring me meaning and purpose in my daily life.
Right.
Sorry, that was a rant.
No, that makes sense. And that kind of reminds me of sort of this sense of an integrated self and almost like connecting to your values and that thing that you really valued about Mormonism originally, right? That's discipline,
that
structure, that now you have actually recreated that inside yourself in a way that is allowing you now to feel that sense of stability and focus and intentionality, right? In your days.
Exactly. And that's like how we make our own dreams come true. First of all, we have to have dreams worth dreaming. And then we have to take all the steps that it takes on a daily basis to make those things show up in the world. And I don't have like a super fixed picture of what that looks like, but I know it includes like moments of beautiful connection with other human beings, right? It includes like moments where I discover new things. It includes moments where I feel like a sense of satisfaction with my career and my like work output. It comes from like showing up for people who need me and being there for others, just as so many were there for me. And just crafting a life like intentionally where I can just do that as much as possible. That's where I find my sense of meaning now. And it feels like I'm walking around with a sense of, you talk about that like sense of home, right? Like I walk around with that everywhere I go. So even if I move places or things change and life circumstances change and careers change, like I feel like I have this inner sense of home that I just carry around with me. And that is beautiful.
That is beautiful. And it is such like the perfect circle tying back to the thing that you started out really longing for and searching for. That's really, really beautiful. So can I ask, you kind of did this in generality, but I'm going to ask just because I'm really curious, moments of rebuilding. What are some moments you can share that felt like rebuilding moments for you where you knew, okay, these are victories. These are some victories for myself. It sounds like that's one,
Yeah.
right? Rebuilding a sense of home. or it wouldn't even be rebuilding. It would almost be like building for the first
Rediscovering.
time,
I
or-
mean, it's like when I was a kid, I had an empty plot of land. And then by being able to be more structured, I built a house on that piece of land. And now I feel like I have a mobile home. I don't know this. I'm stretching this analogy to breaking, but I have like a little home I can carry around anywhere I go. I would say the pivotal moments of rebuilding would be like when I really got serious about my health. Coming out of having a back surgery and being overweight, like that was a pivotal moment for me. And that has been just a long, slow journey, but it's also had like great milestones. Like I remember the first time I could do a ring muscle up, like a strict ring muscle up. That was amazing. Or the first time that I would like really get myself into a yoga pose and feel fully embodied in that pose. Like, so there are so many little beautiful moments, but I think many of those like moments of rebuilding or milestones are when I can just show up. I know I'm on the right course when I can show up.
Yeah. Yep.
That's kind of my ultimate barometer, is like, can I just be authentic? Can I just be real with me and with others? That's when I know I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, you're asking about moments of rebuilding. Maybe if there are more specifics that you want to dive into, I'm happy to answer, but.
We could look at, yeah, I feel like you've kind of answered and shared enough around that. Are there any particular challenges that you've come across with rebuilding?
Like,
Would you say?
I mean, I have a recurring pain. I have recurring pain in my back, for sure. And I have times when like just my fear gets the best of me. I have times when, I backslide a little bit, and I don't take care of myself as well. Right. But rather than shaming myself, I just get back on the horse, just keep going. It's okay. You're generally going in the right direction. You don't need to feel it. We don't need to be perfect. Like the fourth agreement is always do your best. And I kind of struggle with that one. I got to kind of tweak that one, because I just like to say, just do your best, like about as much as you can. And maybe someday I'll be at the point where I'm always doing my best.
But do your best to do your best.
Yeah. Do your best to do your best. There you go. Do your best to do your best to do your best. I don't know.
Yeah, that's recursive.
It's recursive.
In thinking about meaning and purpose specifically, just because that's kind of what we've kind of followed through, how does that, what does it look like now? Meaning and purpose, what does it mean to you now? And how does it show up differently than it has in the past? If we're talking about the good life, right? What does that mean? What does it look like today?
I think that for a long time, I was like seeking something I didn't have to find meaning and purpose. And I think the most powerful idea I've ever come across is just that, like, I'm finding it right now, right here with you, Margi. Like, it's so beautiful to be here with you. And it's so this is the first time. Look, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm used to asking all the questions. And so to have to sit, I've actually never done this before. So I've never sat in the hot seat and just answered all the questions. And it's awesome.
Brilliant.
It's amazing. It's beautiful. Like, I'm finding it right now. Like, and I would say it's more of just a feeling. Like, life doesn't have to get to the end point to mean something. You don't have to have like this reward afterward. And it doesn't have to be like in retirement, then I'll finally have the time to do the things I've always wanted to do. Like, life feels, to me anyway, like it's super worth living just right here, right now, every single day. And I have little moments. Sometimes they're in nature. Sometimes they're in just like quiet moments. Sometimes it's just something you learn where it's just like this aha, light goes on, or being out in nature and feeling like connected to like everything around you and realizing both how small you are and how grand this all is. Like, that is where I find my sense of meaning and purpose. It's packaged within the unit of every single day and moment by moment unfolding of that.
Would you kind of say it's like kind of showing up for what is?
Yes.
Like that.
And just trying to see it for what it is. And that's part of where it was really helpful for me to like peel back, the single paradigm thinking is I feel like that creates some distance between myself and reality. When I have to fit everything into a specific lens and I can only see it through one paradigm, then I create distance between myself and reality because I have to fit it into a thought. I have to fit it into a story versus just like being open to what it is. Just letting it show you what it is right now and paying attention to it. That is like the most beautiful experience to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
Aw, thank you, Margi.
John, Carah, anyone have any questions, thoughts at this point?
You may or may not want to address this. This has been just perfect. And that's kind of a perfect ending, but I still want to ask, some people after a divorce, they face the prospects of dating again. It is okay and even encouraged if you just want to say that's something I don't want to talk about, or if you want to talk about dating at all for those who might feel hopeless or anxious or whatever about, finding companionship after divorce as a post-Mormon. Is there anything you want to share about that?
You bet.
No pressure.
No, you bet. So I have a beautiful human being in my life, our friend, Holly Ashton Wallen. She's like the most amazing soul. And I was really fortunate to meet her. And, I'm glad you asked that question because I would be really remiss to discuss my progress in the last year and not include that beautiful soul because she has been there for me. Like she has seen me and she has given me like soul confidence. And like, I don't know if I have any advice. Like I can't say like, I advise you to just meet the most amazing human you'll ever meet in your life. And then,
It really helps.
become securely attached to them and, have a beautiful love story together. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's actionable advice. I just feel lucky. Like,
because Holly's taken, at least for now.
At least for now, right? Maybe after this she'll rethink that. But like I do think, we as humans, like we pair bond, right? And we like bonding with another human being and going really deep with one other human being and really being fully vulnerable and fully and securely attaching to another human being is a really important part of our personal development. And it is one thing to see ourselves, and it's another thing to fully trust someone and see how they see you. And that's important information. I know, sometimes we say like, well, I don't care what anybody thinks. And I'm like, okay, so you're a psychopath then. Of course we do. And we should, because we don't just live in a world by ourselves. Like we live in a world with other people and we need to care a little bit. And when you have someone who is really close to you, who can both see you and challenge you and like ask you questions, but it's coming from a good place. Like that is one of the best gifts that we can give to each other is to like, and I feel fortunate because, Holly and I both share a passion for yoga. We both share a passion for meditation. Like I just kind of randomly, or, maybe there was some fate, who knows about any of that stuff. But the fact that I met someone who was on such a parallel journey to me, and the fact that we could like just show up for each other throughout that journey as we were like discovering like ourselves and like rebuilding our lives, like I feel so grateful for that. So
beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah. Carah, do you have anything you want to ask or say at this point?
Let me just read a super chat from Kelly Lang, our old friend Kelly Lang.
Kelly, we love you,
Brilliant.
Kelly.
Sent in a super chat and said, "Thank you, Margi, for this new series. Your opening episode last week was our favorite of all Mormon stories." And that says a lot.
Whoa.
Wow.
Love you. Love you
aw,
back, Kelly. Love you back, Lang entire family.
Lovely.
yeah.
Beautiful. One thing that I just love about your story is just the full circle idea of where you start and then kind of where we are here. And that idea of, it's kind of a coming home a little
Mhm.
bit
Mhm.
for you too,
Totally.
For sure.
And also I love how on many levels you have these moments of just acute awareness of your wounds coming up in your story and in your life, and that how you're rebuilding is about you really meeting those and healing those in creating this new experience of life and love and what it means to just sort of be alive in a moment. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to witness.
Aw. It's a beautiful
So-
thing to witness in you too. You know, and we've gone for little walks around the neighborhood, and you know, your ability to just like ask people deep questions and listen to the answers and be present with them is a gift. And I agree with was it Kelly Lang? My favorite Mormon Stories episode. Before that one, it was the one where you talked about baptizing Winston, and now this one was mine. It was
Aw,
beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me come on here.
Yes, thank you for being here, and thank you for being willing to
Mhm.
share your Thrive story.
Yay!
It's a beautiful thing.
Thrive story number 2.
That's right. So
And I'll just say that I was thinking, whoa, that's before you even said that, Margie. I was thinking like, well, that's 2 coming home stories in a row. I'm like, well, that's good. And then I thought, wait a minute. If you study Joseph Campbell, who loved Young, by the way, in his book, A Hero of a Thousand Faces, or whatever it is, you'll
It's kind of his
find that
collected
that's
writings,
the
yeah.
hero's journey. The hero's journey is you set off on the journey, and the ultimate destination of the hero's journey is coming home to yourself. That is the hero's journey.
And the hero's journey, and this often gets left out, it's bringing the boon back to your community. And that's what we're doing here. It's one thing to come home to yourself, but like what we get to do in this space is like bring back what we learned and share it with our community. And that is like a super important part of that hero's journey. But I love that you quoted that, John. That's beautiful.
is the sharing. And I love this too, because I wonder, and we'll see as this series continues, but I wonder if on a level for each area that, you know, your area was finding purpose and meaning, and my area on a level was kind of finding my own voice, right? That all these areas can have an element of coming home to them. And that's something that we may find is in common. I guess we'll see. We'll see about that. But it has been a gift to witness your Thrive story today. So thank you for sharing it. And thank you all for being part of it today. So until next time, we will see you, and happy thriving.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
Love you, brother.
Love you too.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are the best.
Yeah. And Margie, I love having you in the first chair. Thanks for doing this. I'm much more comfortable here than I am there. I think you're amazing. So how are you feeling? Do you feel good?
Yeah, I feel good.
Good.
It was a gift to be here. So
All right. Carah, you want to do the kind of like the final honors and letting people know how to follow up?
How to follow up with giving donations to the podcast.
Just all the support stuff.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for your support. Mormon Stories has had the best year ever. And we're so grateful to have Margi as a part of the team making content, and John Larson, Simon Southerton. Who else am I missing?
That's good.
That's it.
Yeah.
So we have a lot more content coming. So if you like this content and want to keep this podcast going, please go to mormonstories.org and click on the donate button. You can donate either once or set it up for a monthly donation, and we really, really appreciate it. If it's not financially feasible for you to do that, that's totally okay too. But we love our donors, our viewers. If you can just help this podcast out by sharing it, liking it on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, sharing it, liking it across all the platforms. And we love when people can also tune in live and be a part of the chat. And we just love this community that we've built. And are there any other announcements? Do you have any other spaces available for like the workshops that are going on? Is there anything else you want to announce?
Yeah, I mean, we did announce a series of 6 workshops, 5 within Utah, and then 1 online faith crisis kind of support groups. And they're almost all full. So you can go to mormonstories.org/events for now or in the future to see what events. We're doing our best to create events to provide people support through their journeys. So really excited about that. We're doing St. George, Provo, Holiday, Lehigh, and Bountiful, and then we're doing one on live. And if these can become sustainable, we'll keep doing it. But we're really grateful to be partnering with people in the community. Also, Thrive for Women is coming up. I believe it's April 2nd. Thrive is a separate organization, but we we love Thrive and we support it. So check out. And if you're looking for community beyond religion, you can go to thrivebeyondreligion.com, and lots of communities there.
And
as
if you
well.
have any thoughts, comments, questions about the podcast, if you know somebody, like Margi's been saying, that could be nominated for one of these people that you think is doing really well and thriving in a different area, you can nominate them. We'll have the link of where that form is in the show notes below. Otherwise, the email for Mormon Stories is mormonstories@gmail.com if you want to send us your feedback there. And we love you all so much. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.